Welcome to Flying the Coop, a podcast about rethinking how business works and who it should work for.
We are Janelle and Anna, small business owners learning in public as we turn our company, Strange Birds, into a worker-owned co-op. Today, we are interviewing Haley Boehning, owner of StoryForge. Haley works with visionary leaders struggling to tell their story. She helps leaders and their teams forge the most meaningful story and then activate it so they can get the results they need and the impact that they want. She has decades of experience working with leaders of Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, and startups to create clarity, alignment, and engagement through story.
We at Strange Birds have had the pleasure of collaborating with StoryForge over quite a few years. When we're thinking about who we wanted to interview as one of our first guests of Flying the Coop, we were like, oh my gosh, Haley. We should talk to Haley. We've learned a lot from Haley. In fact, I think we stole the mantra we're human first from Haley. She's always reminded us that being human first matters more than hustling. So something that we really admire about Haley is how she's able to work with large businesses who are very financially driven and shift them to purpose driven. So purpose driven is one of those buzzwords that can mean anything ranging from, we deeply believe in this, it's our line in the sand, all of our decisions come from this, and sure, yeah, like we have a mission somewhere, I don't know, we wrote it 10 years ago, but we're purpose driven. So, Haley, to get us started, what does it mean to be a purpose driven company, in your words?
It's a great question, and it's one of those really deceptively simple answers that you say out loud and you think, well, that's easy, we can do that, right? But in actual application and practice, it's really hard. So to be a purpose-driven company simply means this, that the thing that everyone aligns with and aligns around, the thing that drives you, the thing that you wake up to do every day is to solve a problem or meet a need out there in the world that you and only your business is uniquely positioned to be able to do. And that becomes your raison d'etre every day. And it's a wonderful, beautiful thing when you see it. It's really hard to maintain.
So let's say you get this beautiful, like, this is our purpose, this is what we're doing. What happens next? How do you make it real?
Well, I think that one thing that we do at StoryForge that you at Strange Birds are well aware of because we work so closely together is we make what we think is a very important distinction between purpose and mission. And that is that purpose is why you exist. It's the difference that you're trying to make at that intersection of a need in the world and your ability to fill it. Mission or missions sometimes are the strategies that you're going to employ in order to fulfill that purpose. And we find that distinction incredibly important, not necessarily in the telling of the story at the end, but in the forging of the story, because it helps the businesses to see the distinction between the how of what they do every day and the strategies and the programs and the tactics and the services and this North Star of their why. And when businesses conflate the two, it can work for a while, but the problem is something dramatic will happen. I don't know, a pandemic that will completely upend their ability to continue to do the how the way that they've always done it. Markets change, customers change, technology, innovation. And if your why is wrapped up too tightly in the how and your strategies, then that can be paralyzing for a company in times of change and transformation.
Can you dig into that a little bit more? Like, so those are the big symptoms that are really noticeable. Like things are just not working. Oh my gosh. What are some day-to-day symptoms of the purpose and mission have gotten conflated and a little bit muddled?
Yeah.
That you've seen in the work that you've done?
That's great. My favorite one, and it's super easy to test, is that you call up a middle manager and you say, quick, what's your mission statement? And if they do this, wait a second, hold on, I've got it here somewhere. Hold on, it's in a book. I think a binder, it's in a binder, right? If they have to do that action, then you know it's not working, right? Another simple test is you ask 8 individual leaders in the building, directors, managers, the folks who are really on the ground, ask them, What's our mission statement? What's our purpose? And if you get 8 different answers, you also know you have a challenge.
I'm sitting here going, what's our mission statement?
We have it written down. It's not in a binder. It's in Notion.
It's
That's
in
good.
Notion.
That's the thing, right? Like, think about because I know both of you are very involved in community and community organizing. The things that you are most passionate about, if I asked you, Anna, tell me the purpose and the mission, the raison d'etre of Kaleidoscope Youth Center. You'd know it right off the top of your head. It's something you're so passionate about. You have aligned with the beliefs of that organization, and you give your time and your hard-earned revenue and cash to that organization so that they can fulfill their purpose. That's the kind of clarity that we need everybody in the organization to have about our purpose and our mission and our vision. Sadly, often the thing that organizations will do is they'll say, I have an idea. Let's put it on the wall. Let's put it on some mugs and some t-shirts and let's put it on the wall, but kind of make it short enough so that it can kind of fit on the mug, and we start to commercialize our purpose internally, which is, if it is going to be done, needs to be the last thing you do just before you ascend into heaven, because you have so fully embodied your purpose and your mission and your vision and your beliefs. Often we move to that too quickly to try to give people talking points, to give people a crutch to use, when in fact what we really need to do is for people to internalize that purpose, internalize those beliefs and those values so that they can be used as a decision-making filter. If I have to go find a binder, I'm not using it as a decision-making filter, because all we do all day in business, everyone that works for you, everyone that you pay to do work for your business, they're solving problems and they're making decisions all day. That's all we do in business. And so how are you solving the problems? How are you making the decisions? If not using the framework of your purpose, your mission, your vision.
It's interesting. I'm thinking about, like, a lot of the organizations you work with are very, like, financially efficiency driven, right? And there's a real efficiency argument to be made here. It's not as upfront as the super commercialized jingle, easy to remember 3-word mission that you're going to stick on the wall, right? It's something that takes... Right. And it's something, no shade on Nike, but it's something that's going to take time to be built into, like, the bones of how people are thinking and doing. But once that foundation is there, it's then so much more efficient for them to make decisions about, well, what should we do now? How should we go about this? Well, we know because we have this thing that we've already brought into our system. It's in our blood. It's immediately obvious what the right path forward is, because we know who we are and we know what we're doing.
Something that we think about a lot in Strange Birds when we're working with our clients is the end result. Yes, you'll grow in revenue, but the process is more important, right? Of how you're growing in revenue matters a lot for long-term sustainability, for the health of the people who are in the business, for how the customers feel as you are, like, asking them to pay you money for something. So how do you make the business case of, if you are purpose driven, financial wins naturally come when the culture in the United States is productivity is the number one value that we have. And purpose driven, it can feel a little fluffy and a little woo, but it's not. So, like, how do you make that business case to folks for the people who are really just numbers focused?
One thing that I try to keep in mind is that purpose without profit is just a dream. We can see a need and we can want to meet that need, but if we don't have the revenue and we don't have the resources, then it's just a dream. But conversely, profit without purpose is mostly meaningless. One of the analogies that I heard years ago that I really like, that I think actually gets at the core of this, is that as a human being walking the earth, I need red blood cells to survive. If my body stops making red blood cells, I expire. But I do not wake up every day thinking, oh good, I get to make red blood cells today. That is my reason to be alive today, is to walk around and make red blood cells, right? It's nothing particular. Like, maybe one day I could be fascinated with the science of it all, and that could propel me for a 24-hour period. But after that, it's just a function. It's a necessary function to be alive. And revenue and the financials and the bottom line is a necessary function for a business to continue to operate. However, it's not a reason for being. It's not a reason to get up every morning. It's not the thing that is going to attract the best talent in the world to come and join you. It's not the thing that's going to help you make really important and critical decisions at a moment when you have to choose between A and B. And it's not going to help you solve problems in ways that helps you get closer to the vision that you have for your customers or for your business or for your community.
I will be thinking about that metaphor for the rest of my life.
First thing upon waking.
I am making red blood cells. Can I ask a question that is one of my favorite questions that I ask uh business owners when we're like starting to work with them. Haley, what was the biggest no you ever said that reaffirmed your purpose? Not yes, but the biggest no you ever said.
Ooh, that I would say there have been maybe two or three times in the life of StoryForge, so in the 10 years that we've been doing what we do, uh, where I said no to a client, where someone needed our help, they wanted our help, I knew we could help them, but I knew that it wasn't for the right reasons. And I knew it wasn't going to stick. And it's usually when the hiring chief, so the CEO or the owner of the business or the entrepreneur, has been told they need to do this work by somebody else. They have to have the insight themselves, or it's just an exercise that wastes everybody's time. So that first no, I felt it right here and in the pit of my stomach. Like, and I remember it was at a moment where revenue was not looking great for that particular season. And it would have been a really lovely addition to the bottom line to have that revenue coming in. But I could see from the onset, the work would have been meaningless. We would have done a ton of great work, and it would have actually done more harm than good. Because that's the thing about purpose and vision and mission, is that it is almost more harmful to do this work without real intention behind it than it is to not do the work at all. So a few years ago, I was introduced to the head of a VC here in New York, and I went to go visit with him, and it was everything you'd imagine. It was private equity. It was up the elevator to a very, very high floor. The conference room looked out onto Central Park, the most stunning view. I could barely speak for the first 5 minutes because I was staring at the view. And then we sat at the end of this incredibly long boardroom table, and we had a conversation, and we talked about purpose, and we talked about vision, and he said, that's not for us. He said, we are about making money for our shareholders. And he said, and our shareholders are teachers and firefighters and police officers, and they're retired, and we run their funds. And so if we don't make money every year, it puts their retirements at risk. So we are a financially driven, not a purpose-driven company. Now, I said to him then, and I would say again, I think you are a purpose-driven company. The financials that you are so focused on are still a tool in order to do something else. They're still the red blood cells that are needed so that body can go on and do something else.
It's super hard with just the stress of the day-to-day running a business, of being able to take a step back and see that bigger picture, especially when you feel that like maybe in the case of this person, that what you do in that day-to-day has a knock-on effect on so many people that you care about. It's massive. It can be really difficult.
So if you say, all right, I am a business and our purpose is to make money, and that is our guiding light, that is our raison d'etre, we are to make more money every year, year over year, and that's our purpose. What happens if that is your filter for thinking? What decisions do you make as a result of that? And, our history of business in the last 50 years is littered with examples of that. Enron is the first one that comes to mind, but there's so many others.
I mean, not to bring in the boogeyman, but it makes me think of everything that's going on with AI, of people laying off half their employees and creating AI agents, which are generally garbage. Yes, it's more efficient, but efficient for what? Like really understanding, what does efficiency mean?
I'm going to quote a poster that was up at my old work at Meta, which I loved, which was, don't mistake motion for progress. I think about that a lot when I see people talk about efficiency gains as a good in and of themselves. I wonder what they are so quickly going towards.
It can be a natural human instinct to just want to check things off the list as quickly as possible, when it doesn't actually get you any closer to the result. So it's a little like, we use this phrase a lot at StoryForge, which is, it doesn't matter whether you like it, it matters whether it works. And that works for design, and that works for writing, and that works for copy, and that works for anything that we're creating for our clients. We might like it because it's faster and we just hit a button and 30 seconds later something popped out that looked feasible. But is it actually right? Does it actually work?
That feels like the title of this whole conversation, right?
I know.
Like circling back to, is it purpose driven? Like, that's harder work, but it works a lot better than like, oh, I like this, just ship it, let's go,
Yeah.
right? You just end up throwing spaghetti at walls, and then your walls get really disgusting, stuck with pasta. Like, it's not helpful.
Yes. Yeah, and this is why I think
Imagine
that,
that texture.
like, there's something wonderful about when a business has purpose fully installed in the operating systems of the people who are in the business. When it gets used as that decision-making filter. I remember Tom Grody told me a story of his dad at Donato's Pizza, which is a purpose-driven company. They wrote a book on it, and he was, this was after they'd done all their work on purpose, and Tom's dad was talking about this new, very expensive, I think, IT program that they just invested in, that was meant to make the pizza shops more efficient. And as he's giving this talk in one of the pizza shops, one of the pizza chefs raises his hand and says, "Yeah, I still don't understand how this is helping us fulfill our purpose. Can you tell me more about that?" So my favorite thing, two favorite things about that anecdote. One, it was a guy making pizza speaking to the founder and CEO of that company. And the purpose had been so embedded in his thinking that he was willing to question investments that were being made and ask to be given the context about how it moves us closer to vision and purpose. One of the places I see businesses go really wrong in this is in compensation programs. What do we incent people on? If we're incenting people in incentive compensation programs, in RSUs, and whatever form of compensation you choose, if we're incenting people on just the financials, what steps might they take to make those numbers that may in fact work against what you're trying to achieve in terms of fulfilling your purpose?
I remember when I worked in big corporate, the sheer amount of time that we had to dedicate as a team to define the KPI that we were going to measure our own results by, such that it would make us look as good as possible. The amount of time and effort that went into that, because that's what you were judged by and that's how you were compensated. And that to me is not a great system. That time should have been spent making good stuff. We should have been building things together, and instead we were nitpicking over what measuring stick are we going to use?
Yeah. Yeah, and measurement, like, it's important to have metrics. It's important to have measurements, but when you get to this level of Byzantine absurdity, in spending significant amount of people's time and energy and effort in systems that don't actually connect to the reality of the work that you do either, that's another sign that we have a breakdown.
Can you give some other concrete examples of, like, internal systems? Doesn't have to be about compensation, could be about anything that either you've seen supporting someone's purpose or hindering someone's purpose?
I think the one I see more often than not are businesses for whom customer service is important, hospitality is important, and that somehow gets lost in scale. As someone's trying to find opportunities to save money, to take out unnecessary expense, sometimes that human touch that is actually core to the success of that business usually is rooted in their values or their beliefs that are behind that purpose and that vision, and sometimes that gets lost. My favorite example is actually from my corporate world. And it was well before I got to the business, but I worked for limited brands for Les Wexner, who founded his business in 1963. And as the business grew, and I want to say, if I'm remembering the story correctly, it was sometime around like 100 stores. One of his financial guys came to him and said, and I'm going to say guy because I'm sure it was, said, we have this line item for butterscotch candies, and we've got to get rid of it. And he said, what are these butterscotch candies? And here's the butterscotch candies, is when there was one store in Columbus, Ohio, Les would put out a bowl of butterscotch candies on the cash wrap next to the register. And they were free. And if you came in and you were shopping in the store, you could take a butterscotch candy, you could pop it in your mouth, you could enjoy the yummy, lovely, buttery caramelness of a butterscotch candy. And Les did that because he wanted to include that little moment of hospitality, but also because he wanted people to have a reason to come into the store. And it was in a strip mall. And as people were there for other things, they might say, "Ooh, I'm going to pop in and get a butterscotch candy." So they would come in, they would get a candy. He would be able to tell them what was new in the store because they were constantly bringing in new things. He looks back on that decision that he said yes to get rid of the butterscotch candies, the same way that you'll hear Howard Schultz talk about the impact to the business when they closed up the coffee beans. That it was an affront to what they stood for as a business. So for Les, the butterscotch candies coming off of the wrap desk was somehow, I think, cutting off this customer intimacy that he had worked so hard to develop. For Howard Schultz, it was someone looking for ways to keep the coffee grounds more viable for longer, and that if they were sealed and you sealed the machine and you couldn't smell the coffee, it meant that the coffee was going to be would stay viable longer. So it's good for the financials, it's good for the length of that particular raw material that you need to create your product. But what it did was you walked into Starbucks and you no longer smelled the coffee beans.
I love these because it just shows how the smallest things matter the most. I'm a big believer in customer experience. Like that's your number one lead generation tool. That's your number one retention tool. That's your number one everything. And it's usually like those tiny little small moments of delight of like, here's your butterscotch candy. Here's being able to walk in and smell the thing you're about to order. Like, yes, like get the palate ready for that hot coffee. I love those examples.
Every decision that's made by every person in the company, every action that they take as an employee matters. It has an impact. Some of those moments have greater impact, some of those moments have smaller impact, but it all has an impact. So if everything we do has an impact, it can be positive or negative. There's no neutral. So how do we make sure that every decision that we make through the lens of our purpose? So I'll give another example. I was working with a company who wanted to think more about how their purpose, their vision, and their story could come to life through their decision making. They knew that they could do it through their marketing. They knew branding. They were fairly sophisticated about storytelling. But they were getting ready for a big event. I said, well, who's catering your event? They said, well, I don't know. The events team just chooses somebody. We get sandwiches from the sandwich shop down the street. I said, well, is that a national chain? They said, oh yeah, it's like some big national sub chain. We get their sandwiches. I said, well, what if you called Freedom a la carte, which is also a catering company, also based in Columbus, Ohio, where this company was based, but works to help women get back into the workforce, and is not just a workforce development, but does amazing things in the community for women who have been victims of domestic violence and are coming out of the correctional system. One tiny little decision, same sandwiches. I might say actually better sandwiches, but the same order, a tiny little decision like where are we going to order our food from can have an incredible impact, not just on giving you an opportunity to live your story, but also on the communities that you're there to serve.
And
What you've said about the relationship to the surrounding community really reminded me of one of my favorite things that I have learned from our collaborations, Haley, is like thinking about the stakeholders in your story as being far broader than the shareholders, for example, or just the people who are working within the four walls of your company, right? There's a lot of different groups of people, different communities that whatever your business is doing affects. And thinking about how you can sustainably exist, living and doing your story within the ecosystem of all of them, I think that's like the North Star, right?
This work cannot happen in a vacuum. And that is unfortunately what we see more often than not. You get a bunch of very smart people who are leaders of a business, and they think this is our responsibility to set the strategy and determine the direction of this business, and we're going to lock ourselves in that boardroom until we can come up with it, because that's our job. And what gets lost then is, yes, you have seven very, very smart people, but you miss the thousands and thousands of different stakeholders that are all part of that story. And that first insight that we have to have a stakeholder orientation, we have to do the work to understand who are our stakeholders, what are their needs that we meet, what do they want, and where do we align in terms of our vision and our beliefs. That has to be done, and it often can't be done by the seven people in that room.
We've talked about a lot over this conversation. We've covered things like the important difference between purpose and mission, and how purpose is the reason. It's not finance, it's the reason why you're making money. Yeah, cool. Making money is important, but that's just red blood cells, right? How is your business growing in a way that honors the people in it and the people that it impacts? The little decisions that you make that have an outsized impact that maybe you didn't expect, but because that decision went against your purpose. So this is a big conversation, right? Purpose is a big word. So what would be your piece of advice for someone listening to this and they go, cool, I realize now I need a purpose. Where can they start? Like, what would be their first step in this process?
I think there are these 5 questions that I think all of us that are own businesses or responsible for businesses should ask and be able to answer. So the first, very simply, why do you exist? What is that need in the world that you know that you can meet because of your unique skills, your unique abilities? Ask yourself that. Why do you exist? The second question is, who do you serve? Who has this need? And what are all of the different stakeholders that are part of the world of you creating your business and fulfilling this need for the people that you are there to serve? So who are your stakeholders and what do they need? The third question is, what do you stand for? What are the beliefs that you have about your work and how your work has an impact on the world? And get really clear about that set of beliefs. And then the fourth question is, where are you going? And it's not just where are you going as a company, but it is, what is this future that you are working toward, that your purpose, if fulfilled, will help create? How do you define that vision? Where are you going? And then the final question, which unfortunately is where most people start, is how will you get there? If you have this vision for the future that doesn't exist, if you know that if you fulfill your purpose, you can help realize that vision, if you have clarity about who you serve and what they need, and you know what you stand for, then how will you make this a reality? What are the strategies that you're going to employ to fulfill that purpose? Clarity about these 5 answers is the first step.
It's so easy to jump to number 5, right? It's so easy it's almost like, here's the Lego set and you just want to build it.
Yes.
Can we just build it? But you got to read the instructions first.
Yes. Well, I think in business and in the world, we're often rewarded for our how, right? For our strategies. It's very easy. Anyone who's ever put together a website knows that someone is going to say, where's our services page? Shouldn't we have a list of our services? Because we think that's what we traffic in business. But in fact, what we traffic in is outcomes. And those outcomes are very often tied more to your purpose, your beliefs, the vision that you have for the future, than they are to the actual how you will create them.
Well, on that note,
Well, I am always thrilled to be in conversation with the two of you and with Strange Birds. I feel like it's a gift every time we show up for a joint client meeting and they're late. because it means we get to have time, the three of us, to connect as humans, which I adore. I adore you both, and I think your business is remarkable. You're very clear on your purpose, on what you stand for, and on the unique things that differentiate you from all of the other businesses that are doing what you do in the marketplace. And that clarity that you have, and that alignment and congruency with your values is what makes it such a joy to work with you.
Oh my goodness.
You're going to make me weep. That's so, then coming from you, that really means the world. Thank you, Haley.
People who ever work with us, please be late to our meetings. We would love it if you're late. That'd be great.
Appreciate it. Flying the Coop is brought to you by Strangebirds, a strategic messaging co-op for businesses who care loudly. From websites to onboarding flows, launches to long-term strategy, if you want your brand, offers, and experience to tell the same story so your content actually supports your growth, we can help. Find us at strangebirds.land.